Hi, today I'm going to be reviewing the movie Superman, the James Gunn version that comes out this July. If you are one of those people that fancies fable, fiction, film, tall tales, and high adventure, this is the channel for you. If you would, go ahead, click like, click subscribe. That way you'll know about my future videos. It helps support the channel, and it also helps my compulsion to keep creating these videos and tell you more about the art of storytelling. Now, July has fully hit. The blockbuster movie-going theater experience in 2025 is in full force. Critics will be comparing two films this July, one being Superman, the other one being the Fantastic Four. I would like to indulge in that a little bit. I am not too concerned with what is going to be the box office hit or which one is going to be reviewed by critics better or theater goers better. I'm going to tell you which one I thought was a better story and which one utilized the characters better. One of them is attempting to reboot a franchise, and the other one is attempting to revive it. But full disclaimer, I am rooting for both of these movies to be huge hits. My love for each of these is equal. However, the source of my appreciation differs between Superman and the Fantastic Four. Now, my love for Superman stems solely from the 60s cartoons like Adventures of Superman and Superboy. I used to watch those every day as a little kid. And then Super Friends, which came out in the mid 70s. I was like, when I'd watch that, my favorite character was always Superman in it. And then Richard Donner's film hit the scene. This was just on another level for me. Donner's version was epic, and it was true to life, and it was wholly imagined for at the time. And then came the Snyder Cut, of course. It was dark. All the characters around it were dark. The backdrop was dark. Superman is, he's a bright, colorful character with hope and a lot of comedy to it, especially the characters around it, whether that be, Mitziel Plick. I believe that's how you pronounce his name, from The Fifth Dimension. And you got Brainiac, and you got Crypto, and you've got the Mon-El and Saturn Girl and all that. Like, these are all like fun, brightful, goofy characters that I never thought could be done. Here comes James Gunn. And if you would, stay tuned in my following video of the Fantastic Four. I'll tell you which one I thought was better, which one had the better story, and which one had utilized these characters better. Here's my review of Superman.
Hey, buddy, eyes up here.
Okay, so I've just gotten out of the theater, and I want to stay away from my impression until the end. I'll give you the whole picture at the end, but I'm going to touch on each of the little tidbits that make up what this is as we go along. So the question, you have to ask going into this is, what was James Gunn and DC Studios, what are they trying to do? What's their intent here? And of course, it's like, it's to reboot a DC universe. And he has a clear vision to rebuild from the ground up a very unified, creative vision. And it has a consistent tone. And hopefully the movies that come out after this are going to have a similar tone, because he's built a universe here. It is similar sense of humor wise to Guardians of the Galaxy, but way toned down. And I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting this to be a much funnier, sillier movie than it was, just, based on some of the things that I read ahead of time going into it, and just from the trailer alone. But the humor is very, very subtle. There's no like ridiculous moments similar to like Guardians of the Galaxy or even Suicide Squad. The humor usually comes in a comment that's after a realistic moment, and it's not too jabby. It's under your breath kind of stuff. And I wasn't expecting that. That's neither good, neither bad. I'm just kind of pointing this out as I go along. James Gunn has talked about how he was asked to do a Superman movie a while back. He turned it down. However, that gave him a lot of time to think about what it is he wanted to do. How would he do a Superman movie? I mean, making a Superman movie has got to be, out of making any movies, it's got to be one of the most
insurmountable task to accomplish for multiple reasons. There's been a lot of thought put into every little detail in this, and this isn't something that you put together in 2 years. This was put together over a long period of time and had a lot of thought. And he probably had a lot of help too, of course, not to take anything away from James Gunn, but there was clearly a lot that went into every idea and every point of view and every even little detail from it. Now, it's, of course, most of you know, it's not a retelling of Superman. This is mostly an introduction to this new DC universe, and you are guided through how this world works versus our real world or any other fictional backdrop. And it really does touch on what the consequences would be to the surrounding figures if, and bear in mind, Superman's not the only metahuman in this. See, there's multiple different characters that show up, and you have, pocket universes that they introduce. They do a very good job of allowing you to ease into this new universe that they're introducing you to. So it's not jarring, even though, and I should add this, if go when you go into this, you probably should forget everything you know about Superman, unless, of course, you are a Superman aficionado. Most people are not. It really does touch on all 87 years of Superman's existence. So keep in mind, Superman has evolved over a very long period of time. So it does not feel like the old Superman. It doesn't feel like the old serials. It feels barely like the Flesher old cartoons and in the original Action Comics. But it does have a bit of Action Comics, Adventure Comics, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen comics, Lois Lane comics, Superman, of course, Superboy. And then it does feel, it's got a little bit of like the Super Friends in it from the cartoons. Oddly enough, it has Easter eggs from the Donner movies, but it doesn't have any of the Donner elements, except for like there's like Otis is in it and Eve Tessmacher, and those were introduced from the Donner movies. But like really, there's no parallels to that world. The world that Richard Donner created was a very real to life world and was epic and dynamic and very focused on just one aspect of the real world being introduced to this Superman. This is not similar to it at all. So for those of you that love Donner and expecting the continuation of that's not happening. It does have a little bit, it did have a feel of the Ruby Spears cartoons from the 80s, a little bit of the Bruce Timm animated series from the 90s. Of course, it's got Smallville elements to it and a lot of Arrowverse too. So all of those things all had either, the one thing that they were doing or they had multiple things. This takes all of them and puts them together, and it takes the best of them, probably, mostly some of you who aren't familiar with any of the things that I just mentioned. Some of this might just seem like goofy nonsense that you've never seen before. But I will add, in what I saw, I didn't feel like they did anything because it was in that comic or because it was in that cartoon. They did it because the story called for it and it felt right. And mostly so for those of you that do understand the comics, I would say this felt more so than anything like a John Byrne Superman comic from the 80s, especially the reboot series of Man of Steel that they did. That kind of was like a retelling of sort of the origin and what that world was like, so that because John Byrne continued on and did the Superman series after that, and it felt like a proper universe for Superman to live in. And that's what this felt like. This felt like there was reason behind all of it. So, let's get into some of the aspects of it. It does open up with a little bit. It's not so much like a Star Wars scroll, but it's kind of like a exposition that's written that was succinct. It was tight. It wasn't too much, but it was super helpful, especially for anybody that's like, oh, it's a Superman movie, and they just go into it and they think they're going to know what's going on. No, this is a different universe, and they had to give some exposition to that. They start off by telling you, the metahumans have been there for 300 years, and that Clark came 30 years ago. So you get the idea, like he exposed him, and everyone's known him for 3 years. So that means that in his late 20s, is when he exposed himself as Superman. So here he is. And it was interesting that they used the 300 years roughly as a point, because that's relevant to Hawkgirl's going to be in this. We'll talk about her in a little bit. Was introduced maybe 300 years ago. But more importantly, Vandal Savage, and I believe Vandal Savage might become relevant. If you've ever seen the Arrowverse, he's a major villain in that. And he does show up in a lot of the animated cartoons. But that was interesting. But they introduce you to the timeline, and then they tell you what's going on as far as the politics. There's these two wars going on. And as you find out later on, Lex Luthor is involved with it, and he's got his hand in every one of these political pockets. You know, Superman, they nailed every aspect of Superman. So anybody that was complaining about the suit, once you sit in this film and get to know this Superman, that's the suit he would wear. He's, I don't want to call him corny, but he's definitely like an idealist, and he's just filled with hope, and he sees the good in every single thing. Because, and by the way, David Cornsweet was so wonderfully cast. I mean, this is the Superman now. I can't picture anybody, you know, even though like Christopher Reeve, everyone thought he was so great and whatnot, and he was. This is a more perfect Superman with respect to all of pop culture of Superman. So the Superman that everybody or any one person might know from any facet of it, he fits into all of them perfectly. This is a very well cast. And the whole time I watched this movie, I felt like that's Superman. Didn't question it at all. Didn't even think, I wasn't even outside of, you know, the place thinking like, oh, well, I guess he's Superman. Like, I didn't think about it at all. He was always just Superman, and it felt very right the whole time. Lois, on the other hand, and so Rachel Brosnahan, who plays Lois Lane in it. Some of you may not have been introduced to Rachel in any type of, I mean, mostly Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, where she's from. I watched that, so I was very familiar with her, and I love her. She's just fantastic. So going into it, I didn't have to feel like I had to like, oh, let me get to know this lady, you know. And even if you don't, like, you know her, you don't know her, what a perfect Lois Lane. I mean, you know, I think about it, and Lois Lane has actually been played very well by men. Like, there's only a few times I could think of where like, yeah, she's not really a Lois Lane. But the most of them, I would say 80% of the people cast as Lois Lane, not only were they perfect for the role, but they did the job well. Terry Hatcher usually comes to mind. She was one of the best Lois Lanes. This is maybe the best Lois Lane. I mean, she's so perfect. And, you know, if you've seen Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, you're like, oh, it's very similar to that character too. She's got so much spunk. And very similar to the original. So like the Margot Kidder from the Donner, she had a lot of the essence of the original character that showed up, kind of like the My Girl Friday feeling of the sassy reporter. She nailed it. And if you watch some of the old like Flesher cartoons and the old serials, you know, that's the essence of Lois. And she, you know, she's evolved and become more than that since then. But this was in every Lois Lane. Rachel is, I'm going to put her as the best I've seen so far. So that's a big plus for this movie. And then her relationship with the two of them, you know, it was a fast-paced movie. There wasn't a lot of time to rest. And anytime they were resting, it was well used with the two of them kind of sitting together with, you know, with whatever was going on with them. And you felt it, like there's a connection between them, and I love it. And I'm trying, you know, I can't think if another couple has done it better. I mean, Reeve and Kidder were pretty great as far as chemistry. These might be even better. I really loved them. Like, so there, you know, there's the character of Lois Lane, there's the character of Superman, and then there's the character of them together. Like it felt right. It was that was one of the things that was really good about it when you were resting in the plot of the story. Then that brings us to Lex Luthor. So Lex Luthor in this, and there's been a lot of great Lex Luthors. This one, even Nicholas Hoult does a really, really great job, but I almost feel like this one was written better than any of the other Lex Luthors. And I did mention the John Byrne comics. He felt like that Lex Luthor. That Lex Luthor. Oh, and by the way, Lex Luthor, in the history of it, he was originally a mad scientist. And then he became more of just an evil villain as it evolved. And then John Byrne created this idea that Lex Luthor was more of an entrepreneurial billionaire genius who's manipulating, with the diplomacy of all the walks of life, whether that be the politics of different things with countries and all that. I mean, and when you see the movie, you'll kind of see it like, oh, that's the Lex Luthor that John Byrne created. You're like, yeah, that's the one. You're given the cliff notes to what makes him so brilliant. Like it's shown he is a force to be reckoned with compared to Superman. And this is a world where, there's these superheroes that are dynamic and there's monsters and there's all kinds of crazy things. This is a formidable foe that is ahead of all of them. He's multiple steps in planning ahead of them. He's got Superman figured out and he knows how to take him down. And it's not the simple like, oh, you just use kryptonite. Like, no, he has a long list of ways to stop him, not only to stop him, but to change the narrative for all. Social media plays a massive role in this, especially with Yves Tessmacher. He's manipulated, much like, some of the politicians of today, the narrative and change his perspective very easily. He's got his finger on the pulse of all of the world's perception, and he's very good at that. And he is a diabolical bastard, coupled with the fact that Nicholas Hoult played him fantastic. He is great in it. I don't know if he's the best Lex Luthor I've ever seen, but he's pretty damn good. This one's written so beautifully and so brilliantly too. This is one of the things where, I was mentioning that James Gunn has had a lot of time to think about this. He put a lot of thought into how Lex Luthor works and how he works and maneuvers through this particular universe. Then you also get, you got Jimmy Olsen. Jimmy Olsen will surprise you. I don't want to say he's a different Jimmy. He's a more textured, and he's a hero. He's a big hero in this. You'll have to see the movie to understand what I'm saying, but you're going to love him. And they ease into him too. Like you don't see a lot of him, and then you see more and more of him, and then he becomes more and more relevant. And it's just great. The Daily Planet plays a bit of a backseat in this in comparison to some of the other films, as well as all the other members of the Daily Planet. And of course, you got Perry White, and you got Jimmy Olsen, you got Michaela Hoover, and you got Steve Lombard, who, if you're familiar with some of the older comics, he shows up in, and Cat Grant. And then one of the big things, I mean, some people are going one way versus the other on this, and that's Crypto. Crypto is probably the most lighthearted part of the movie, and his role is way bigger than you think. He is a major character throughout. He's a sidekick. He's important. He's a hero multiple times, and he's a massive part of the pop culture of Superman. He's shown up in, especially the old Superboy comics and the adventure comics, and and if you ever watched the Adventures of Superboy from the 60s, that cartoon, they did a great job with him. I find that like if you're not going to like this movie, it might be because of that, because there is a ton of Crypto. He could be some people's Jar Jar Binks, and for other people, he's, if you're one of those people that likes watching dogs and cats and kittens and stuff on Instagram, you're going to be fine with it because he's super cute, but he's cool. The Kents, they play a little bit more of a backseat, but they're a little more true to the comics and some of the cartoons. They're not these larger than life characters that, like in the Donner movie or like especially in the Snyder universe, where they made this heavy connection between Kevin Costner playing, Jonathan Kent and Clark Kent. It's not that deep. These are bumpkin, down to earth, good Southern folk that they played a big part in raising Clark to be the way he is. So that, it's part of the DNA of him. And they show that, but they're not anything crazy. They're just, they're part of the scenery, and they're extremely important. Then you got Mr. Terrific, and he's of course terrific. More so than any other iteration I've seen of him. Most people aren't going to be familiar with Mr. Terrific unless you're a fan of the Arrowverse. And in the Arrowverse, I wasn't familiar with him until I saw him in the Arrowverse, and I was like, really? This guy's Mr. Terrific? And in the Arrowverse, he's way dorkier. He's also gay in the Arrowverse. This seemed more like the Mr. Terrific that you would get to know. I mean, he's just a computer genius on so many levels. So he has gadgets every which way. He's Tony Stark times 5. So we're also introduced to Hawkgirl. She's one of, I guess they're called the Justice Gang. Here's the little thing that's tied to the way the Hall of Justice looks from the Super Friends cartoons. The Hall of Justice is being built in this movie. They're eventually become the Justice League at some point. None of the characters really, I mean, you got to wait for like Wonder Woman and Batman and some of those characters to show up before you can really start the Justice League. But you've got the Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, you got Hawkgirl, and you got Mr. Terrific. And then, of course, Superman already exists too. Which leads me into the Green Lantern. Guy Gardner is great in it. He's not a character that I like in the comics at all. He's probably my least favorite Green Lantern, but Nathan Fillion made him very, well, not likable, but, enjoyable, entertaining, of course. But he's a douchebag. He's a douchebag, and you love him for that reason, because he's a lot of the comic relief in it. Oh, and I will add this about the Superman robots. These could be items that are divisive for fans. I really liked their inclusion. It seemed like on paper, I would have been like, really? You're going to do but they were very necessary for the plot. It helped with helping, because they were involved in so much help for the characters involved. So, regardless of all of that nonsense, the Superman robots were something that are steeped in the comics, both some of the cartoons, but a lot of like Superboy comics. And then even later on in the Superman comic books, they do show up. And it's funny. I loved how Superman referenced them as the Superman robots. That's what Superboy called them when he was a boy. And because he was this genius, and he would go and create all of these duplicates of himself so that he could be in two places at the same time. He could also be Clark Kent, and then people would see Superboy. So it was something that was nice to see used so appropriately.
Superman robots, I thought I told you to keep an eye on him.
We feed the canine, but he is unruly. And he realizes we are not flesh and blood, and couldn't in our heart of hearts care less whether he lives or dies.
It was almost like there was too much fun and too much action. And that's what this is. That's what this is. This was an elevated entertainment event. And I haven't gone to a movie and had that experience in quite some time. Sure, it's got a lot of depth and a lot of heart in it, but it doesn't have some of the really grounded, deep moments that some other movies might have. And it doesn't need it. It doesn't need it. So really, that is one of my rare complaints with this, is that it's a little too much fun and a little too much action. No, not too much. You know what? It had action all the way through, and I like that about it. So that's not actually a complaint. Now, the story goes all over the place, but like solving a crime, it all comes together. And there's this really beautiful couple of moments near the end where Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane have all the facts they need, and they put all the pieces together. And it's this Sherlock Holmes Eureka moment that's so great. And It's simple. I might be overplaying this as far as it being this crazy, oh, they're so brilliant. Like, no. It's simple, but there's just a lot of pieces that came together. And I liked that moment. The dialogue was very well thought out, efficient. So there's not a lot of nonsense. There's no useless dialogue. There's no, because I've seen some of the, especially some of the stuff from the Snyderverse. Some people liked Aquaman. Sure, that's fine. But the dialogue in it was for children. It was just so bad. And this didn't have any of that. It had some simple stuff. There's simple dialogue in it, but it was very well used and efficient and, not overly chatty. It wasn't a Quentin Tarantino movie by any means. So it utilized it very well. The music, for example, and I always touch on the music of films, was subtle, but then you're going to have an emotional, unless you're a pod, you're going to have an emotional reaction, and the cues are perfect. They just cue these in, and those are the moments where you're like, oh, this music is good. And then it's done its job, and then you don't notice it as much anymore. And when you do notice it musically, it's good. It's very good. I gave it total props. Great. The music is fantastic. And it does have a little bit of the John Williams, Richard Donner theme in there. Very subtle, not a lot, but it's there. Just, as a theme. It's still there, but it's only like a couple of notes. The na 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 na, used many different ways, but none like John Williams did. So it's different, but it allows you to have some sort of recognizable theme to Superman. So my feeling on it as a whole, I really feel like this is one of the best movies I've seen in a while. And it surprised me. Going into some of the past Supermans, even Superman Returns and then The Man of Steel, there was always the Donner movie before it that made it so unsurmountable to beat it. And this did what all of them should have done, which is to completely ignore its existence and do its own thing that's, wholly its own, separate. I'm sure this isn't for everybody, but I feel like the people that this isn't for, they don't like all kinds of fun. This movie is a lot of fun. There is never a second where you're going to look at your watch and go, okay, when's this over? This has been a long movie. You will experience that 0 times. You do need to suspend some, reality aspects because it is goofy. I mean, you've got a dog with superpowers. You've got, Metamorpho who turns into all kinds of stuff, and he almost looks like a genie at some point with the smoke at the half of his body and the top being rocks, and it's crazy. It's just nonstop crazy, but it works. It is probably the best movie going experience I've had maybe since Endgame. I mean, I almost said Top Gun, but I do like this better than the Top Gun experience. For those of you that are diehard Donner fans, as far as this, and I am, but you're not going to get that. There's no elements of Donner. I mean, there's some Easter eggs, but it's nothing like that. I mean, Superman Returns was a continuation of it. This doesn't have anything like that. And then especially, I mean, there's people that are like, Snyder fanatics, love the Snyderverse, and if you hold true to that, you're gonna hate this because this is on every level the opposite of any Snyder vision. Full disclosure, I couldn't stand any of the Snyder movies. I mean, Man of Steel was okay, but the rest of them is just so dark. This is the brightest, most fun, happy. This one has a lot of emotional messages that will touch you that the Snyderverse couldn't even have done because they just didn't have those capabilities emotionally. As a whole, it's definitely the best movie of 2025. So this year, if you follow along, the part 2 to this is going to be my review of Fantastic Four. I haven't seen that yet. Of course, it hasn't come out, so I can't compare the two. I just know that going into Fantastic Four, there's going to be a lot to accomplish for it to even come close to this movie. So let's see how that goes. I'm hopeful too, because I'm rooting for that to be fantastic. So if it's half as good as this, I'm happy. If it's as good as this, I'm over the fucking moon. Seriously. So that was my review. I'm Foxy Sellers. If you would click the like, click subscribe. It'll push me to do more content just like this. And so if you liked it, you'll see and hear more of me again. Stay tuned for the Fantastic Four review coming up in 2 weeks. Thanks.